going slowly.
Yeah.
This is new. It's giving me a little spinning wheel on LinkedIn. All right. I think we're good. Nelson, welcome to Consulting Growth Insights.
Thanks, Mike. Great to be here.
So, Nelson, you and I got introduced through a connection of ours randomly via LinkedIn. Chatted once prior to this, and you are the founder of Pro CFO, and you've been building the company for a while. And I have sort of from the outside seen a lot of the things that I tend to advise my clients to do. So I figured let's bring you on and try to talk through some of the decisions you've made over the last 6 years or so building the firm and how you've done it, and kind of I'll try to reverse engineer some of the things maybe a little bit, and we'll see if we can show and tell the viewers and listeners how it's done, if you will.
Sounds good. Just one point, co-founded. Me and my business partner
Co-founder.
this, exactly. Me and
Co-founder.
Holly
Don't want to
started this in
offend
January
anybody.
2020. Yeah, no. That's a fun story to get into. If we have time, we'll talk about it a little bit. But
That's actually, you know what? We didn't plan on this, but here we go. First detour. And I think choosing a co-founder or choosing a partner to bring into your firm is one of the biggest decisions someone makes.
yes.
And it can immensely impact the firm's position, because you either create alignment or you create misalignment over time. And if that misalignment happens, then we kind of know where that goes. So let's maybe talk about that a bit. How did you decide to have a co-founder instead of doing it on your own?
So I'll do the short version of my history in the space and where Holly and I met and what made us decide to take this journey together. I've been in this space, this fractional CFO, this financial leadership as a service space for close to 15 years now. I say it semi-jokingly since before it was cool to be a fractional anything. I got into this space a little backwards. I was what I thought at the time happily employed when a friend reached out and said a friend of his is having some trouble with his company. Can I have a conversation and give him some advice? And at the time, I was like, help out a friend of a friend. Sure, we'll have a conversation. And that turned into a year-long interim role that I held juggling my full-time role. But that's really what set me down the path. So I immediately started doing this on my own. I did this as a solo for about 7 to 8 years. Realized there has to be ways to do this bigger and better. I went looking, and I didn't really like what I found, because I found the firms that existed in the space did not really serve the team well nor the clients well. There were firms that were doing this kind of work, but I just felt there was a misalignment between what the market needed and the support that the team was actually looking for in joining firms like this. I did join one firm.
I'm going to interrupt you right there because that's an more important piece. It's a big piece that I talk about quite a bit for those who follow me around. The what I call positioning intent and the positioning reality. So tell me a little bit more about that. What was missing in a lot of the firms that you believed?
So what I found in the space where we operated was that the models that existed either usually did not support the team members well. They treated them by and large as commodities. Like, great, we're just gonna either we're gonna sell the work and you're just gonna go in and figure it out and do it on your own, in which case you turn over clients really, really quickly. And there's very little support for the person actually delivering that work. It's kind of just, here, you probably can do this, so here, go do it and let us know how it goes kind of thing. Or the alternative version is something like a franchise kind of model, which has spun up obviously and grown in popularity. And then it's similar, like, okay, great, you're part of our franchise, go do stuff. it's like, what stuff? How do we do it? Like, yeah, but that's okay. You're part of a franchise. So it's like, again, I found limits to the value it drove for the team members, and also, frankly, limits to what it drove for the actual clients they were serving as a result of that. Meaning, what does the clients get from being serviced by a franchisor in this greater nothing? By and large, over anything else, there was nothing that the client saw that was different or better or anything like this. And similarly to the other version, the same thing. There was no process, there was no firm involvement by and large in the client engagement. So again, it felt like there was very little value from those kind of organizations. I did join one firm. Fantastic people in that firm. Based in the, actually based overseas, but they were trying to build here in the U.S. Again, some incredible people there. It just didn't work here for various reasons, but it was there that I met Holly. I'm here in the New York region. She's based in the Chicago region. We were both there for 2 years, and for the last year or so, we kept having some variation of the same conversation over and over and over again. And it was something along the lines of, "Is this really the best way to do this?" And the best was not about our own egos. Best was, is this best for our team? Is this best for our clients? And the answer was no. So we were basically faced with a decision. We can either stop complaining about it or we can go build it. Now, you and I have been chatting here for all of about 5 or 6 minutes, but I highly doubt I'll strike anyone who's listening to this as someone who will stop complaining about it. And so in January of 2020, we launched this company. We decided 2 months before a global pandemic is a great time to start a business. When we launched, it was me, Holly, and 6 CFOs, and now there are nearly 60 of us on the team.
So going back to the founding story, if you will, how did you decide that your co-founder was the right co-founder?
Mission and passion is probably the two biggest factors. It's like, are we aligned on what we're really trying to do as a mission? And does the passion exist over there? Because that's the part that will take companies much further than just this particular skill set. I would probably put it in those two buckets, mission and passion.
Mhm.
And for us, it's really about, we believe, as an organization, we've always been a dual purpose organization, recognizing the area that we play in. Number one, we believe every business owner deserves to work with an expert CFO to guide their success. But number two, we also believe every expert CFO deserves a platform to practice in a way that's meaningful to them. So we have to build the organization that supports both sides to it. And so with Hale, it was very much like, this is what we're trying to do, and this is what it will take to be successful. And excited about building this and doing this. So that's really what led us down this path.
So as co-founders, what have you done to maintain alignment as the firm has scaled from, like you said, 6 to 60?
So for
Because
us,
that's an important piece, right? In terms of making sure that you don't end up building two different visions within the same firm.
it is, and it takes a lot of work. Anyone who says, "Oh, it's simple, just do this and it works," has never obviously been through this. It definitely takes a lot of work to continue to build it and to remain aligned around this. Ultimately, it comes down to, are we still on the same journey or the same path to where we're getting to? That doesn't mean each of us don't have other ideas that we can also do. For us, it also becomes, how do we either bring this in to test it within the organization, or how do we say this isn't the priority for right now, but it will be, 2 quarters down the road on the roadmap of where we're actually up to. It becomes that kind of conversation. It does require, and it's funny, everyone says like, "Oh no, we are two partners, always need to agree on every single thing." You absolutely don't. And if you do agree on everything, then you're probably not actually partners in most of the stuff you're actually doing. There's a healthy friction to the role that's required. And I use those two words very, very carefully. It does require healthy friction, the same as it does across any leadership team, whether they're partners in the business or not. You need people to actually challenge and to go through those kind of things, because that's how you actually, that friction, that idea testing, that collaboration, that conversation is really where the magic gets made and what actually will drive an organization forward.
Can you? I wonder if you can talk through an example of where the the original vision was set, but something that you were deciding on, you disagreed on, and there was seemingly a fork in the road. And how did you address that?
It's funny. I don't know. Actual fork in the road is probably the way I would describe it. I mean, there's always things we disagree on, because
Yeah.
two different people, two different visions, two different experiences we're bringing to the organization. So ultimately, one thing we were clear in the beginning is, okay, where are the areas within the organization each of us are focused on, instead of it being, oh, we're both responsible for everything, which never works. So it becomes, okay, which are the areas that we're each focusing on? What does it take to build this? What are the resources and support we need from each other in order to be able to continue to build this the right way? But it's funny, is there a specific fork in the road kind of scenario? I can't think of a specific fork in the road one. There's always things that's like, oh, we can do this, we can try this. Usually it's some version of, okay, do we want to test this now? Do we want to try this now? Or do we not want to do this yet? And so usually you'll have one champion who is like, okay, no, we should do this now. We do this now. And it becomes that responsibility. Like, okay, how are we going to test this if we're going to go do this? Doesn't make sense to do this right now. Or does it make sense to not prioritize this because we have other priorities? Because in a scaling business, you have to say no to a lot so you can say yes to what you actually need to be doing. You must say no to a lot. There are a million ideas that keep coming up, and you have to want to keep trying them. And they're all great ideas, or many, not all of them, but some of them are great ideas. But you still have to say no to most of them in order to focus on what you're prioritizing at any given time.
Yeah. Well, and this is maybe a good segue into one of the things we want to discuss, um, which is like the idea of what can you strip away to make the business simpler. And the kind of the litmus test or the lens I always like to look at it as, is this something that is going to support the position that we're trying to take in the market, or is it something that is going to take away and muddy that position, right? And I always say that there's no such thing as neutral, because if something is quote unquote neutral, all it is it's still creating noise. It's still making things more complicated. Maybe talk. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and then maybe talk through a few examples.
So it's interesting the way you framed that, and I might push back a little bit even on the framing, because the framing, to a certain degree, is narrowing the lens perhaps more than it should, or frankly, making things simpler, even that perhaps shouldn't be, which is counterintuitive to the question you just asked. So it refers to what I like to call a fallacy of exhaustive hypothesis of it's either this or this. The answer is some of the things you want to build should be doing this, and you won't know until later whether it actually does it or it actually moves you in the wrong direction either. So it sounds good in theory to make it binary, and obviously anything that can be boiled down to a binary position statement, obviously we definitely want to. But I think the real challenge when companies are scaling is that it becomes easier to build another process or add another person or build another workflow than it is to actually solve the underlying challenge. Like, okay, we're struggling with this process. Great, let's just add another person who's going to manage it. And it's like, did that actually solve? I'm not saying you should or shouldn't hire the person, but is that actually the solution? As opposed to, what doesn't change over there? And the best example I can give of that is a company we worked with where when we started with them, it took them 4 to 6 weeks to send out an invoice after they finished the project. You can imagine what that does to their cash flow if they're first starting that process as late as they are. By the way, worst reason ever to lose a client is because you cannot build them fast enough. And they did. They lost one of their biggest clients is because they were unable to build them quick enough. But when we dove into why it took them so long, we found their operations manual. So first of all, kudos to them for having an operations manual. And in their operations manual, the way it's listed was these are the bulleted items. These are the things that happen before the invoice goes out. The problem is when they put this in place, they were literally 1/10 of their current size. And as they scale, so for that, when they first put it in place, was one person responsible. So for that, it was almost like a checklist. Like, great, we need to make sure this is in place, and then we can send an invoice. But as they grew, and that became 6 different people, and then 6 different departments, they were just keep adding more people and to this process instead of actually solving the process. So in that organization, when we walked in the door, it would literally go through 6 different departments before the invoice would approve to go out. That's a great example of, okay, just add more people to this instead of solving the underlying issue. So we cleaned up their process, and now they invoice within 5 days of completing a project. But that's a great example of, yes, these are the things we identify need to happen. We're just going to put more people at it and to make sure it keeps happening. And the answer is sure. And suddenly you're collecting way too late. You're losing clients because you're not billing fast enough, and all those other things actually happen. The problem is, it's easy to look back and identify it. When you're living in it, it's a lot harder to identify.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess the framing is more about kind of the internally facing part of this in terms of um, and it's a way to help you focus, right? In the
It
sense
is.
of, well, is that I've got 50 things I could do, or 50 things in my parking lot list, if you will. Which three are we going to test right now? Well, let's focus on the three that we believe are going to support our position versus the ones that we're not sure about, right? That kind of deal. Um,
Also
so what
breaking down sometimes long-term and short-term priorities. Like
what's that?
it's sometimes it is also breaking
Mhm.
down long-term and short-term
Yeah.
priorities. Like those companies are scaling, it's like, oh, we want to keep doing this. I'm like, that's great, but if we don't tackle this now, this is the problem.
Yeah.
It's going to create whatever that is. So yes, that bigger priority is what we need to get to, but we need to solve this underlying issue that we're running into today, or
Yeah.
that we're never going to get to be able to solve that problem.
Yep. Yep. One, when I think about think about from a positioning lens, it's
Yeah,
almost always that long-term
yeah.
uh, v- vision or long-term view, right? Because um, there are things you need to do now that might not have that impact like you were talking about. But if you don't solve them now, then 2 years from now, your position looks all muddy in the market. And,
Or but let's tie it down to where business owners actually care about. You're running
yeah,
into a pipeline issue right now, or you're
yeah,
not actually bringing in enough whatever you need to. Great. If you're not solving your positioning, then to your point, your messaging is all over the place. You're never going to actually get to this.
yeah,
And you, as a founder, do the heroics and potentially still drive revenue. Sure. Is that
yeah,
actually drive building a scalable organization? Definitely not.
yeah. Well, so that's actually that's a really good call out and a common one, right? Because a lot of firms that's tends to be how they get stuck
Yeah,
is they do depend too much on founder and or partner heroics.
yeah,
And I've seen firms scale to pretty significant amounts that way, north of 10 million even.
yeah,
Um, but it's heavy burnout. And, every time a partner walks out the door, you feel like, oh my God, how are we going to maintain this? Or how are we going to get to to 15 from the 10 that we're at right now or whatever
yeah.
it may be. How did you manage that in your firm?
So there's a couple things. One, and it's both sides. It is recognizing, yes, most companies that start definitely have a founder led, a founder involved. So the answer isn't as simple as just remove the founder and build a process around it. The answer is, okay, where in this process is the founder's impact most heavily necessary to drive the continued growth and goals of the organization? So for us, a lot of it was, okay, where is my role, where is Holly's role in this, in these different pieces that we're touching, and how can we fill in the blanks around this to continue to make more things scalable? When it became about, yes, I was involved a lot in the sales process, I'm still involved in the sales process, but now we have more things that are driving top line funnel instead of it just being, well, who does Nelson know, which is where companies start by and large when most of these kind
Yeah.
of things come into play. So we're able to drive more on a consistent basis. Am I still involved? Sure. Are we still building the processes based on what I have done that we work? Yes. But now we're also evolving it. Okay, how should this process evolve as we get to this next stage based off of what we know works? Because you cannot, it was one of the early lessons that we run into very often, and every founder at some point runs into this. You cannot clone yourself, but we all try to, for whatever number of years that we start, we all try to clone ourselves, and it simply does not work.
Yeah. Yep. I've definitely been there in the past iteration of my business. I know.
Oh, as have I. First
Yeah.
couple of years, like, oh, if I can just find somebody else who does this like
Yep.
me, right? And then everything will be solved over there. If I just
Yeah.
find someone who does it the way I do it, who sees it the way I see it, who does this, and then it will be simpler and it'll be done. Except you're not going to find
And then you tend to shift to, well, let me see if I can bring in somebody that's close and I'll train them.
that.
That fails pretty miserably most of the time.
It does, and we've seen organizations go through this all the different iterations. For us,
Yeah.
again, we've definitely bumped our heads against those same challenges as well. But that's where we need to be able to call each other out on it. Is this really what we're doing, or is this actually helping us move forward? The answer might be we want to test or try something for whatever period of time. Then what are we investing
Yeah.
in to try that? And what is the return we want to see on that investment?
Yep. Yep. Um, so what are some other ways that you've uh, I guess built processes without overcomplicating things?
So for us, it was also recognizing where process helps and where are we not going to, what does it actually look like in our space? And it's recognizing like, okay, again, I'll pick sales for a minute and then we'll jump into service delivery afterward. Like the service, sales to a certain degree, like I'm not expecting someone to walk into a sales call with my degree of knowledge based on selling as well as the actual delivery of service as the CFO. But it is a lot easier to teach salespeople how to sell CFO or financial leadership services than it is to, frankly, to teach CFOs or financial leaders how to sell. So it became, okay, what is the process we need to identify? What is it that they need to be aware of to do this? And that is, frankly, it doesn't stop as we continue to build that process. As we build our team, we're going to continue to build our team in that space to continue to drive it. What is the pieces that we can process? What are the common objections we're going to run into? No, they do not need to be the expert CFO in the sales call. They do need to have enough knowledge to be able to have the conversation in a meaningful manner to support our clients on their sales journey. But the client success side is one of the biggest ones because in our space, what most firms end up doing is some version of, oh, you need a CFO. Here's one. They're going to show up and do CFO stuff. Let us know how it goes. And when you're small and it's 10 to 15 people, that's okay because you know every single CFO personally, you know exactly what they can do. You're much more involved in matching and doing this, and that's okay. Your weekly Friday call is simple. It's just 10 or 15 people. You can run around the room. How's everything going with the client? And that's great. That doesn't work when you start hitting 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 people. And so the process that needs to be built for how we manage and systemize the onboarding. So what is a pro CFO, what is a pro CFO client journey versus what does the individual CFO client journey look like? How do we systemize that to scale where we're actually trying to go? And that's where we spend a lot of our time building these pieces.
On a lot of that, I'm sure also, and tell me if this is an incorrect statement, but ties back to a decision that was probably made at some point, either consciously or not, of how do we want to be seen in the market. And I'm guessing based on what you said, it's consciously.
It is.
And what does our onboarding need to look like? What parts of our onboarding that worked when we were 15 people or 10 people did our clients love and that supported our position of how we wanted to be seen? How do we keep that? How do we maintain that? Or how do we improve that as now we're
So
20,
one
30,
second,
40, 50?
let's be clear. Most organizations of 10 people don't have any onboarding process, so no, ourselves included. But it wasn't as necessary, which is why it wasn't
Yeah.
prioritized. Because with 10 people, again, we know
Yeah.
the CFO. I'm involved with that. I'm handing it off more directly to that CFO in doing this kind of work. It wasn't as necessary to really think about a system until you start
Yeah.
getting really bigger, and it's like, oh, wait a second, we kind of need a system.
Well, you might not have had a system, but you still did it,
Need it,
right?
yeah,
So the
no,
point
exactly.
was, and you were able to
And
think about, well,
and
what
that's
worked and what didn't.
why what we talk about on the client
Yeah.
success side and delivering this is okay. To your point, what is it that needs to happen? What was it that we did so well when we were smaller that was happening, and how do we systemize that outcome versus system?
Yeah.
You know, you can't create a system around a person, but how do we systemize what the client is getting through that stage, which this people used to do individually? How do we make that the
Yeah.
pro CFO way of doing things?
Yeah. And like an example I like to give in these instances is, well, if, and it obviously is a very much oversimplification, but if you are trying to be known for speed in whatever industry you're in, doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter, whether it's, call it speed to insight, whatever it is, right? Um, and all of a sudden, as you scale, your process, your onboarding process takes 5 weeks instead of 3 days. Well, now how does that justify that, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to ensure that you're doing it in the right way.
No, no question. And what we focus on in that onboarding is more, again, the things we used to do naturally as individuals. How do we systemize as a firm?
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And what is that way of actually doing this? So, not to oversimplify, but there's a lot when we onboard with a company. You understand what the company is doing. You understand where they're up to as an organization. You need to understand where they're trying to go, not to make things too complicated, right? Like that's really what we're trying to do. The problem
Yeah.
was each individual person was kind of doing it their own way. This one would want to see this one would want to see this one would want to see this, all to drive the same outcome. So we've started standardizing, like, okay, all
Yeah.
of this is happening that first month. These are the tools that we develop that helps our CFOs do this, but it's all to the same outcome. And then the
Yeah.
individual CFO expertise shows up and what actually happens and what we do with that process when we get
Yeah.
started.
Yeah. So something that you told me before we jumped on, and kind of how you've described the firm to me is, I mean, you've talked about in the beginning, fractional leadership as a service. You talked about what you offer is embedded leadership rather than fractional CFO, etc. Um, and one of the things you also mentioned is related to that is this idea of kind of the advisory posture that's there in consulting. Um, Talk to me a little bit about that, and I'll kind of weave in some questions around positioning there.
Yeah. So I think in the consulting world in general, and this is a challenge we see with our team that we again when they onboard with us, it's how do we help them navigate through this, especially in their first few engagements. The consulting industry in general treats the advisory posture almost as sacred, right? You observe, you analyze, you recommend, and then you step back and let the client decide on what's actually there. And the entire pyramid, frankly, on a consulting model is really built around this. Consultant
Mhm.
maintains that intellectual authority, and they stay outside of this and that. But that doesn't really work when you're working with organizations the way we are and what we're doing. So our clients can be anywhere from startups to close to a billion in revenue. But when you think of the entrepreneurial environments that we find ourselves in, recommendations without owning the outcome of that, without being the leader in that organization, doesn't deliver what the client wants. It's easy to just say, "Oh, sure, here, here's a report that says what you should do. Let us know how it goes with whatever you decide," kind of thing. That just doesn't work. Most of these companies do not need more analysis. They need the decision. They need help with the decision. Need somebody to help them execute the decision. Need someone to own the outcome of the decision. Doesn't mean it always needs to be right, but you need to be moving it forward, or the conditions need to be set for, hey, this is a decision we're making. This is what we're going to go do. We're going to know if it's working by this point in time, and therefore how we should actually do it, or continue or not continue on that space. That's really what it comes down to when you're talking about embedding as a member of their team versus being the advisor who meets with them, whatever period of time and says, "Oh, this is what you're going through. Maybe you should try this, or have you tried this, or have you tried this," kind of thing. And by the way, that is all relevant. I'm not saying businesses shouldn't have advisors, but that's a limit to what the consulting, what we provide as our clients as providing financial leadership as a service, truly embedding as leaders within the organizations that we serve. Are there times when for us it is just a project? Of course. But we still need to understand what that project is supposed to deliver and how is it that we're aligning with our clients' expectations and needs to ensure we're delivering that outcome.
So from everything you described, it sounds like you kind of chose that. You identified that as at least part of the gap that was there in the
Yeah,
market, and you chose to position yourself within that gap. Is that a fair statement?
absolutely. Very deliberately on our side to ensure we can actually do this because think of the really big consulting firms, the big three, right? The McKinsey, Baines, and Boston Consulting Group on that side of things. Their entire firm and model is built on the structural side, not the philosophical. Meaning for them, they don't care about embedded accountability because it's one senior against all the juniors who are actually doing all that kind of stuff. And we chose very deliberately not to do that in this way because then, frankly, from our perspective, it doesn't serve the client profile that we actually work with by and large. The small to mid-sized companies, it's not that they don't need consultants. It's that they need somebody to actually sit there in the room next to them and actually own the outcome of what's being decided and how it will actually happen.
So, what were some decisions you made kind of throughout the last 6 years that were based on that viewpoint of we're building an embedded leadership organization?
For us, well, was one key one, and it keeps coming up because I'm not saying we won't specifically do this, but one key one is we get asked a lot is, do we do full service? Do we also do bookkeeping? Do we also do
Mm.
accounting? Do we also do controller? Do we also do this? And we've chosen very deliberately to stay in the lane of financial leadership because if we think of our role in as we've been describing it, you can't really be doing all of those different other services as well because then it just becomes your engagement becomes around selling all your full service lines rather than actually being the out, driving the outcome for our clients.
Mm.
For us, it's how do we build, manage, and lead the function that drives our success, not how do we sell more services. And again, at various points in time, a one-stop solution is great for many organizations. I've just felt for our space, it's no, you need to be able to begin separating the function so that this exists past what we work with them. One of our core values as an organization is we measure our success by the lasting impact we make on our clients, not by how long we're there, not by how much money we charge them, not by the lasting impact we make on our clients. So for us, we need to build a function and structure that will drive their success even after we're gone.
Yeah, well, the incentives part is actually really important since you mentioned that, which is you can say you want to be seen in a particular way. You can say whatever is important to you, but if the business model you create and that you run creates incentives that show otherwise,
Yeah.
everybody can see right through that.
Absolutely. It's why, as a firm, it's one of the reasons we get asked, especially early stage startup ones. Oh, we do deals for this. I'm like, no, we're fee for service only, and we have to be because any service provider who has some other incentive when it comes to a different outcome than what may actually serve the company best. You're talking about misaligned expectations, misaligned objectives, misaligned those kind of things, which doesn't serve the company overall. So we
Yeah.
focus very much on how do we align with what your priorities are? How do we make sure we're delivering to those priorities to ensure we are guiding their success?
Yeah. So how do you think about uh, expanding the services you offer? And I'm kind of leading the witness a little bit, but because the one of the big one of the big things I see pretty consistently in boutique firms is, well, we grow by offering more services to existing clients and more services that more clients can buy. But that again gets into this idea of incentives. If at some point your objective becomes we're just going to sell more services, and that's the thing. Well, does that support the position or does it detract from it?
So it's funny. The lens that we look at that is, if you might be familiar with the old Ansoff matrix of growth,
Hmm.
the two by two model, essentially. The
So,
easier
well, I get it. Let's tell everybody in case they're not.
Sure. So he built this whole model basically describing how the easiest paths of growth is basically you can either sell more products to the same companies, or you can sell the same products and services to new clients, essentially to new customers. When you're trying to do both at the same time, it becomes much harder if you're talking about both growing essentially over there. So we focused on a couple of things. Number one, we do have more offerings, but it's more about ways of entry points than it is specifically around, oh, we're going to also sell this and also sell this and also sell this. We have some things that we do add on to our clients, but it is very specific around the value it adds and what it does to support the engagement overall, not just can we collect more incremental revenue from this client. I'll give you a for instance. Very often with our clients, we're there as their CFO, but there are occasionally companies that we run into where it's like, okay, they need a separate, like, actual strategic planning kind of workshop, or really dive into what the revenue model is, and that's which becomes more of a workshop offering. But it is not, oh, great, now we get to charge them for a workshop. It's no, we need to do this kind of workshop setting because this will allow us to continue to deliver at the value that we want. So the workshop might be structured as a separate standalone. Sometimes it is embedded within the engagements that we have. Sometimes it is a separate standalone, depending on how involved that workshop needs to be. In addition, because we've grown as rapidly as we have, like, we get pulled into some bigger companies where sometimes those are just projects, not just the ongoing CFO kind of work. Sometimes that's more so interim CFO, because we get pulled into some bigger companies. It's like they need us to hold the seat while things are going on in the company. So we get pulled into more in different environments as we've scaled and grown. The only other, I'll call loosely, ancillary services that we've actually spun up, and this was not specifically a plan when we launched. We were dragged here because our clients kept asking us for help, and we just got tired of cleaning up the mess from bad versions of this. Is actually a little bit in the recruiting space, but is extremely targeted and very specific to where our expertise actually adds value to that conversation, which is usually at the senior level in the finance and accounting function. So think accounting manager, controller, VP of finance, or full-time CFO. We do some full-time recruiting, but we did spin it up into its own company because I didn't want to go to market under the same brand. The messaging gets all muddled that way. But
Yep.
we were dragged here when our clients kept asking us for help. And again, we got tired of cleaning up the mess from bad recruiting because we found many recruiters don't understand finance and accounting.
Hmm.
And so they would just say, literally, the actual story that finally convinced us to do this was when one of our clients says, hey, we want to hire a controller and this is what we want to pay. And they went to a standard recruiter who said, that's great. It should be 20% more. And here's 53 profiles. Here's the top 5 profiles with, here's the top 5 with controller experience on their resume. And they were talking to us, and we said, what do you mean when you say controller? What does the rest of the function look like? How big is the company? What are you trying to do as an organization? What systems do you have in place, and where are you trying to get to? At the end of the conversation, we basically told them, you don't need a controller, nor should you pay that amount. You actually need a different level role, and you should only pay about 70% of what you suggested initially. But no recruiter would ever really tell them that. Now,
Right.
obviously, there are specific firms that would do that. So by and large, that's not really what that industry delivers for their
Hmm.
clients.
Yep. Yeah. Which again goes back to the incentives conversation that we had a little bit earlier. Um, what when you talk about everything that you're doing, whether it's a entry point that you're adding in or a value add that you're adding in, has to support the core value that you're offering. What does that mean to you? Like, I want to get very explicit here to for people to be able to get a good example. Like when you say the value that we're providing, what does that mean? What does that look like?
So we focus on, there's our core values as an organization, which is obviously the lens that we look at most of what we do with our clients. Because again, it's not just, oh, can we just collect a bigger paycheck from this client? Yes or no. These are the values that we have as an organization, and frankly, what our team has and what we screen for in asking people to join our team. But aside from that, the value to the client, and this is something we generally try and focus on right when we get started, is truly understanding what their goals are, not just the number they put on a spreadsheet, not just whatever, not just a revenue number, but what is it they're really trying to do as an organization and or as a founder. For some business owners, like, oh, sure, we want to grow. Great. Does grow mean 20% growth, or does growth mean 10x? What is it we're really trying to do as an organization? Because again, whether it's a different offering or whether it's just our core offering, we need to understand what is it that we're supporting and what is our role on that journey for that particular business owner or that particular organization. Because the company that wants to grow 20%, and what we're going to get involved with looks very, very different than the company that wants the 10x. You're talking about different needs, different structures, different things along the way. Everything looks very, very different. And so our focus is always understanding where is it, and you heard me reference this, where is it that the company actually wants to go. And the fun part is truly understanding that business owner where he wants to go differently than what he may or may not be putting on paper, because there are some things that will not show up in just a goals session. Like, oh, sure,
Yep.
we want to double the company. I'm like, do you really want to double the company? Is that something you actually want to take on to do, or just look good and you see the opportunity to do so? Like, what is it you're really trying to do
Yeah.
as a business owner? Some business owners, like, hey, I just want to give my family the lifestyle that I could never have as a kid. Great. Let's be clear that that's what you personally want from this company. And so when we success or failure is measured through that lens and making sure we can deliver that. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm thinking about an exit, but I don't want to let my team know yet because I'm worried about they're all going to leave. Okay, let's figure out what that means for you as a business owner and how we actually do roll this out to the team. Maybe we do need to develop some kind of deferred comp plan to keep your key people around. Maybe we do need to figure out what this is that will actually drive the success you're looking for. So truly understanding the goals is really, really important. What is it they're trying to do and why are they trying to do this? Really understanding that is critical at the start of every engagement, which is why part of our
Yeah.
process is really helping to pull that out of the business owner.
Yeah. What's fascinating to me listening to what you just described is it's almost identical to how what I do with clients, because I also happen to work with mostly founder-led organizations, and that tends to be that founder piece tends to be forgotten by most consultants and advisors. It's like, let's create your offer, let's create the messaging, let's figure out your positioning. Which, by the way, I I used to do that too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let's do that, and then I would get surprised when things would not work. And I'm like, well, wait a second, I thought we had this objective. Yeah, but in reality, that objective didn't actually match what the founder really cared about. They just, whatever, how those things happen. So that I find that part fascinating. But it, going back to what you were describing, that really fits into, again, this idea of embedded leadership. Like,
Yeah,
that's what an embedded leader does. They
absolutely.
get to know the person that they're leading with, or they're helping lead
Yeah,
on a deep level, so that they can help them reach their goals, right? Those are all the things. It sounds very warm and fuzzy, if you will, until you really kind of boil it down to the basics, if you will.
yeah. Again, we joke about this a lot. It's not, being able to identify a goal is great. Helping company execute on a goal is, it obviously looks very, very different. So
Yep.
also recognizing the challenges that are involved there. I remember working with one organization where it was like, oh, we're going to double the company next year. And I'm like, great. You have the pipeline. You can go do this. Sure, no problem. I'm like, great. Can you come with me out to your factory floor? Do you think you can actually deliver double from this factory over here? Oh well, I'm like, okay, great. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but let's be clear what actually, what success looks like and what needs to happen to achieve it. You know,
Yeah.
or that someone in the CPG space, in the consumer packaged goods, or they're trying to build, or they're trying to do this. We need to get this distribution deal and then we'll be set. I'm like,
Yep.
yes, this distribution deal could do this. Are you familiar with what a distributor is going to ask you to deliver and how they deliver and how you get paid from that deal? I understand the revenue side of what you're seeing from there, but you understand like what it actually means to be able to do this. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. Let's just build the organization that can operate under those conditions that you're going to need to.
Yep. Yeah. Um, when again, kind of going back to that idea of embedded leadership,
Mhm.
as you're scaling, that is something you have to, I would assume, train all the CFOs that come to work for you on, right? Because it's not, as you mentioned, this was something that was missing. It's maybe not as missing in the market as it was in the past, potentially, but it's still not. It's maybe probably still a little bit more counterintuitive than not. Um, how have you handled that?
So we built an actual onboarding process with our team, which is actually pretty critical. We're actually middle of one, which should be wrapping up actually this Friday, I think. But we're always looking for more people to join our team. But we're also very specific with what are the qualities of success. So they go through 3 to 5 rounds of interviews. They go through personality profiling to really understand this, because it's not about the technical skills that make someone successful working this way. It is very often about the soft skills and the leadership skills. So we've had to develop how are we screening for that, and then also guiding our team. Like, okay, it's great you know how to do this analysis, deliver this product, deliver this report. How are you actually doing this? And one of the easiest, but perhaps most powerful framework very often we need to do with our CFOs, especially in their first engagements, is if you were their full-time CFO, what would you do? And you almost always they have the answer and they'll just rattle it off. I'm like, great, just because you're there part time doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing all of that. You just have to figure out how you're juggling your engagement level to drive that success.
Yeah.
Because as a part time, we almost naturally fall into what I call the consultant trap.
Mhm.
We advise them, or we wait for them to tell us certain things, or we do this kind of things, and that goes counter into again. That's counter to what very often our clients are looking for and what we're delivering, which is that embedded leadership. We don't wait for this type of thing. We have to be driving
Yeah.
the success. It's not like, oh well, the CEO is busy this week, so I couldn't meet with them. So great, if you were a full time CEO, if you were a full time CFO and your CEO was busy, what you would take off that week? What does that mean? What are you doing? Like what are the things you're working on? Who else on the team are you involved with? What does it look like over there? So we go through a lot of those kind of conversations and guiding that when it comes to service delivery side and
Yeah.
ensuring we're supporting them in that success. So that goes back to that platform side where it's not just, oh, here's a CFO, they're going to do CFO stuff.
Yeah.
Again, when we were much smaller, those conversations were easier to have on a weekly Friday call. Like, great, what's going on with this client? What are you up to? What's going on over here? As we've scaled, that became building out a client success function to ensure we're delivering ensure our clients are experiencing the impact they're looking for.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and again, I'm gonna keep coming back to it because this is the work, if you will.
Yeah,
But everything that you're doing goes back to that phrase, if you will, of embedded leadership.
it,
That's the position, right? So
it
when you decided, and I mean, again, tell me if any of this is wrong, but when you decided to create that client success function that you just mentioned, right? It was with the intent of supporting that, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And as an internal conversation, it was actually something Holly led internally, for this side of things, where again, talked about the different roles in the company. So those she saw the pattern developing over there and what the need was. And it shows up in consulting firms, it shows up in retention. When you're
Mm-hmm.
not doing it, how quickly are you churning through clients? Why are you churning through clients? What are those reasons that you can
Yeah.
qualify them around? And so she tested one or two versions, and then we actually said, okay, great. Now that we know enough ourselves, or know enough to know we needed
Yeah.
to know, we need a different level of expertise. Then we went out to actually hire the leader and actually build out that function.
But talk to the example maybe a little bit more, if you don't mind. How does what was going on at the time that made you think that layering in a client success function would help um, support that the embedded leaders that you were trying to cultivate? And what were some of the decisions that you made about what that function looks like to ensure that it did just that?
So the warning flag for us to realize we were missing something was actually retention numbers. When we started looking
Mhm.
at this a couple of years in, I was like, wait a second, our clients when we first started were lasting this long. There's a whole bunch of them that are not lasting as long. What's going on? And that was like probably the first flag that rate was raised, and it's like started looking at it, it's like, oh, okay, well, these clients are churning for these reasons. And first of all, internally, we created 4 buckets, and then we went through every single engagement that we lost over a certain period of time. It's like, okay, which bucket do they fall in? And when a certain number of them started showing up in the same bucket, we realized, like, okay, yes, there's parts of every engagement that is not within our control. In every consulting engagement, there will be parts on the client side that is beyond your control. But what we recognized was more than half of it was within our control. We were just not actually doing anything about it. And that became like, okay, if this is within our control, how do we actually build these pieces that will actually drive a different outcome? And so it became, how are we onboarding in a more systemized manner was the first step in building this out. So we built more of a standard onboarding and kickoff process. Then it became, okay, well, what's our process for how we check in with the clients the first 90 days to ensure it's delivering what they need or want? It became, how are we adapting our onboarding to, this is the process we're supporting you with. When do you raise the flag? When do you raise your hand earlier that you need assistance on this? How do we work with you and partner with you on your first engagements to ensure you're getting the right level of engagement you need to be successful? All of that was really the whole journey, and the journey doesn't end. We're constantly evolving this and looking at other ways to do this better, for our clients and for our team.
Mhm. And why? And I'm asking this
Yeah.
uh, as an observer, if you will, from the outside. Um, why not? Um, why were the CFOs themselves not able to fulfill that?
This goes back to a little bit the embedded leadership part of it.
Mhm.
Is by nature, this is working differently than they have previously.
Mhm.
It's not like they're coming from a management consulting background that suddenly they're doing this and this is the engagement and this is how it actually does or what it works like. Everyone on my team has been a CFO before. They haven't been a management consultant before. And the role that we play, yes, it is being their CFO, but it's working differently than they ever have previously. So yeah, some of them have tried this on their own when they join us.
Yeah.
Some of them try this on their own. Some of them come directly from a full time role. So there's things that they're seeing, or they're, or almost to a certain extent, like they're waiting for their client to tell them what to do, because that becomes natural for them when they're not there on a full time basis.
Yeah.
Back to your point of embedded leadership, is like, that's not good enough if you're waiting for them to tell you. A, they may not know what to tell you, and B, why aren't there other 16 other priorities that you're focused on that you need to be driving forward anyway?
Yep. Yeah. Well, and that's interesting because as a trend, what I generally see right now is the practitioner led boutique firms tend to be the more successful ones right now because they understand what it's like to be uh, on the other side of that seat, if you will,
Mhm.
or they've sat in the seat that they're serving. But it does create this exact problem that you just described in a lot of instances where they've done the work and they've done it well, and they understand all the rules and the regulations, if it's a regulated industry, all this stuff, and the politics and all of that. But they don't necessarily know how to consult, if you will, and they don't know how to manage the client. And it is a skill, and it's you know um, I've definitely seen that in a lot of firms. Once they get to a certain scale, you have to create what they call it a client success function, account management function, whatever, but something where somebody else kind of takes that off the plate of in your case, as you describe them, the embedded leader,
Yeah.
but off the people doing the work.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they don't get involved.
No, absolutely. Again, it is absolutely, they need to get involved, obviously, because they're the ones delivering the work. But it becomes, how are we helping them ensure they're delivering at the level that they need to? To your point, we joked about this internally when we were building this, and continue to talk about this. It's not about teaching them how to be CFOs. They don't know how to be CFOs. It's a reminding them sometimes that they are the actual CFO. They're not just a consultant. Not that there's anything
Yeah.
wrong with being a consultant, but it's the outcome of what we're trying to get to, which is really, really important.
Yep. Yep. Um, I think that's a great place to stop, actually, Nelson. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think would be worthwhile to throw out there as it pertains to um, supporting the position, in your case specific, that embedded leadership position? Is there anything else that you've done um, that we should chat about?
I think that covers most of it over there. Going back to where we started, again, the keeping things simple, that actually on that side of things. So I think I used it in my newsletter, the E.F. Schumacher quote, on that side, who's actually an economist, of any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. Like, that's really important as companies are scaling, to really be thinking about. And even from our perspective, as we're building out the pieces that support our team, how do we simplify this as much as possible in a way that still drives the outcome that we want?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Nelson, thank you for sharing your story with folks. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do so?
ProCFOpartners.com. We have a lot of resources up on our website. Feel free to take a look at any of them. Again, that's ProCFOpartners.com.